You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hello. Welcome back to Accounted For. This is the podcast on a mission to expand your perspectives, have you question the status quo, and get you inspired to action for your own career. The podcast is part of OMD Ventures, my platform to create ecosystems so that high performers are inspired to challenge the conventions. On top of the podcast, the platform has weekly essays, newsletters, and these include my daily learnings from the week. And so if you'd like to be on top of all the other stuff I create, subscribe to the newsletter at omdventures.com/stakeholders. So I call it stakeholders because you can also further support the platform by donating. And the donation comes in the number of coffees you can buy me. So you can buy me like a cup of coffee a month, a cup of coffee a week, etc. And this will actually play into this new thing I'm trying out where I'm hoping to engage more with you, my listeners and fans. And I'm planning to do that by taking questions because I've been starting to get emails, and it's, given my time constraints, it's harder to meet each person in person or even just have a separate phone call dedicated to one person. And so for most of these questions, I figured I'll actually make separate episodes where I do something like an AMA, like an Ask Me Anything, and I answer your questions. And so right now the idea is to give a special benefit to those who will donate coffees to me. And it's literally like, if you were to take me out to coffee, you'd get to ask me questions. That's exactly the same thing, only now we'll do it online, and once you ask questions, I'll make an episode where I answer them and put it out there. And so you won't just be benefiting yourself, but also the other listeners as well. So there's a bit of helping everybody out with that. So yeah, check it out. And there'll be instructions on how you can submit questions, etc. So yeah, thanks for that support. Okay, so enough about me and the platform. Today's guest is Rob Catalano. He is the co-founder and CEO standing for Chief Engagement Officer at WorkTango. WorkTango is a HR software company based out of Toronto with a passion to improve work lives. Rob started out his career in the world of traditional marketing for consumer goods companies and quickly got interested in what drove human behavior and the metrics behind that. He became one of the early employees at Achievers, the employee rewards program, and this was not really the master plan. Rob had left the marketing world to start his next venture, but it was a fateful application to a bootstrapped startup he didn't know about at all that propelled him to this 10-year career into the world of HR and changing workplaces. After Achievers was acquired, Rob had the choice of staying on as a C-suite executive with a very cushy compensation package, but he left it all to pursue his passion. He left Achievers with his co-founder to bootstrap what is currently WorkTango, and it's been a 4-year journey of building a company with a passion and not a mission. We cover Rob's various inflection points in his journey, making tough but obvious decisions, and what it really means to follow your passion amid this long career that he has. And so I really hope that my chat with Rob expands your perspectives, have you question the status quo, and inspires action in your own life. All right, enjoy the conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast, we have Rob Catalano, Chief Engagement Officer at WorkTango. Hey Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast.
No worries, thanks for having me. Excited.
Yeah, likewise. So to start off with, for the audience members who may not be familiar with your company, what is WorkTango? What do you guys do? Where are you guys based out of? Can you give us a kind of brief overview of the company?
Yeah, so company-wise, we're headquartered in Toronto in Canada. We have an office in Ottawa, an office in Denmark, but we operate with companies in 70 different countries around the world. So even though we're only 3 offices in 3 cities, we do work globally. But to give a little context of what we do, I usually like starting with what the problem typically was for organizations. So everyone that's listening is probably in some capacity have taken an engagement survey as an employee, give their feedback to the organization. And for 100 years when companies did this, it was annually based. It took a long time to get the insights from a vendor, maybe months. By the time it sat in HR and they gave it to the hands of leaders that people can actually do something about it, it was another month or two, and that's how companies typically did it. So WorkTango was built to help make that a more real-time and agile process in companies. So we help companies hear the voice of their employees for any purpose, whether it's engagement or getting feedback on, sentiment around inclusion in the workplace or major change management, etc. We get that insight in real time, so no waiting for information from vendors in a quantitative way, but also qualitatively to see themes and sentiments on what employee feedback is. So it's just a lot easier way to get that information, but also put it into the hands of the right people. So not just HR if you don't want it to, but you can put it in the hands of hundreds or thousands of leaders just for feedback for their teams or their departments. So that idea is, how do we hear the voice of employees and help organizations more agile, adjust, and build a better experience to, at the end of the day, build engagement. And we all know what that does to the bottom line and the impact on customers.
Right. And so if I was in, let's say I was back in my old consulting firm and we implemented WorkTango, would I have a separate kind of icon that I go to, do I just go to WorkTango's website and I'm just periodically filling in feedback? If I wanted to give a manager of mine feedback after a project, I'll just go there on my own will and do it? Or is there some kind of protocol that I would follow?
Yeah, typically companies define how they want to set the cadence. So some companies still might do once a quarter or even some once a year, maybe the large municipalities. But other companies we work with, every week, 2 weeks, they're prompting you to get feedback. And then what happens is now you're more accountable for that. You get the trends in real time. But it would be something that would prompt into your email box or a text. Or again, if you're an employee that doesn't have access to those, there's other methodologies we can use as well. But it's something where you can either go to or you're prompted to provide that feedback on any device.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when I introduced you, I introduced you as the title of the Chief Engagement Officer, which if we shorten it to the acronym, it's CEO. But instead of Chief Executive Officer, you call yourself the Engagement Officer. What is the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, well, if you think about business in general, right? Most companies talk about shareholder value and profitability. That's the most important thing, and that's what they talk about. And then the next thing is all about the customer and why they're important and how companies have to focus on that. And then employees are usually the third in that loop. But when you start seeing what successful companies do is employees become number one, right? If we focus on employees, they conduct the right behaviors, build the better products, better service, that's going to build really great customer satisfaction, right? And loyalty. And once you get that, that's when you start getting shareholder value go through the roof, right? It's a service profit chain, and successful companies like Southwest Airlines is very adamant about that process. And in a really poor market, they've been pretty successful. And the idea and the whole title was that as a leader in the organization, my number one role is to make sure that employees are engaged, right? Blocking and tackling, making sure that they don't have barriers to success, understanding what makes them tick. Because if we can build an environment of really passionate people that are engaged at the end of the day, I know that's going to impact our customers and our bottom line in a much better way than just focusing on what decisions are we going to make here to make money.
Nice. And so I'm going to take this back to maybe the much earlier part of your own journey, where maybe try to get an idea of how did this all kind of stream about this focus on people and this love for creating, improving work lives. In your life, you've lived in the UK, you've lived in San Fran, you lived in Toronto, and your company currently serves companies all over the world. Did you grow up in Toronto or did you grow up somewhere else? I know your background's Italian.
Yeah, my parents were born in Italy, but I grew up in Toronto, literally not too far from Jane and Finch. Spent 30 years at home, just like a good Italian boy does, and then moved out with my last kind of tech and startup company to San Francisco in the UK. But that was kind of the journey from where I lived. But the journey really started in marketing, right? It's interesting. I spent 18 years now building HR technology companies and consulting, advising in that world, but I don't come from an HR background. And people always ask, where did this all start? But literally studied marketing, worked in marketing agencies back in the day. And literally when I started into, this whole marketing space, it was fascinating, right? Why do people buy? What motivates them? Why are you tied to a brand and wear it on your sleeve? And then I got to the workplace and I was like, who really gives a shit about that? Like what's really fascinating is why do people come to work and work harder and are tied to the organization, and why are they passionate about what the company's doing? And it was way more interesting than why you would buy a certain brand of shoes. So for me, all the same concepts of marketing, even things like analytics, like the analytics you were getting on your customers, that really started prompting the, a lot of what I did, since then, which is with Achievers, it's a Toronto company in HR technology, and that grew to about, 300-400 employees before it got bought. And the big reason why we started WorkTango, right? Still passionate about the HR space, but it came from a marketing consumer lens. So I always say I'm not an HR guy, but super passionate about it. And, and most of the talks I do or places I speak is with an HR lens, but it's not where I started.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I got so attracted to your journey was because I felt this kind of kinship where I come from this very weird professional service world doing accounting and finance, and now I'm obsessed with people, and people still get very confused when I try to tell them this is what I'm trying to do. And so for you, like your journey started out in Ryerson. I think you studied marketing there, and then I think while you were in school, you still worked for a marketing agency, Match Marketing?
Match Marketing Group, yeah.
And so you worked there, and then you joined Achievers afterwards. And so was it during your time at Match that you started kind of thinking and seeing this kind of shift in mindset in yourself internally about like looking at, the consumer patterns and thinking, can I translate this into the workplace?
I wish I could say I was smart back then. It did not happen that way. Like literally when you're in marketing and you're working for an agency, at the end of the day, you're working for the customer's brand. So you can come up with ideas, you can execute, but it's not your decision on what route that brand goes or where the budget goes at the end of the day. So literally being still, 2 years out of school, thinking I knew everything, I'm like, screw the agency world. I'm going to go work for a company and own a brand. So I left the agency world. I think it was a Match for, 6 years in and off, like during school, and then said, okay, I'm going to find my next career. And I never wanted to work for a big company, because after sitting in large organizations as an agency, I just didn't like the speed of it. And so I'm like, I'm going to find that next cool, small, medium-sized company and own marketing there. And I'm like, I'll get this random job to pay the bills until I find that. And I lived at home. I didn't have that many bills, but I mean, still, to still live a, fun life and travel. And that's where I landed in this little company called Snap Promotions back at the day that actually turned into I Love Rewards, that actually turned into Achievers. And there was just this handful of very small group of people that was on this journey, shifting the concepts of, rewards and recognition to a new light. And that's where I was in a new workplace saying, wow, there's something here, right?
Oh, wow. So then when you didn't really intentionally go out to find a company like Achievers and say, this is the place I'm going to join you. This was supposed to be more like a side gig while you still thought on the idea of what mid-sized company do I want to join?
Yeah, I was like, let me because I took a summer off. When you're a marketing agency, you don't get summers, right? You run around, work 90-hour weeks, and I did all that. And I'm like, I'm going to take a summer off, hang out at the pool. After 2 months, I'm like, let me just get a job. Like, I don't want to be, lazy. I should actually do something. And literally, that's when I just landed a job literally to wait. And at that time, I was actually debating moving to Vancouver. And I was like, I'll just do something until I make a decision. But once we were there for a couple of months, it was like, wow, look at this, this concept of focusing on the workplace. I mean, very different. Think about, 2005, right? Companies didn't have all this focus on people. In Toronto, we were very unique at Achievers with all the unique people things we were doing. And that's where it really all started, was this motivation to say, this is way more important than, selling products to people.
And leaving that agency world after 2 years and even taking a summer off, if I were to think back to my time, is 2 years out of school, but my friends and I think my peer group, there's this kind of impression that if you take any kind of time off, if you don't, climb the career ladder, that everything's going to end. You're going to be left behind. What was your thought process then, on, taking the time off, leaving this big corporate world to not join another bigger corporate entity, but, think about it, take your time and all that?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is I never started a company until 3 years ago. I was an early employee at Achievers, and I never had that entrepreneurial thing where I'm like, I need to start a company, and that was delaying me to go to a big company. But there were a couple of things. One was, like I said, I had the experience of being in it with the agency world, of seeing the politics and just things I didn't really like at the end of the day. But what I also saw was all my friends that left school that went to the big consulting firms or the accounting firms was like, all right, this is my 9-year plan, and I have to climb the ladder and do this for 2 and do this, or in the legal world I have to do my articling. And I was like, you know what, like, that's not motivating to me. And what's really cool about the kind of startup experience I got back at, I guess what became Achievers, was you go in and you wear multiple hats. You learn what you love, you learn what you don't. I led marketing for many years there. I didn't even start in marketing. We didn't even have a marketing department. We were so small. And I was able to put up my hand and say, I want to try that. I'm interested in that. So it allowed me, I didn't want to go to the big firm that was going to put me on a track. I was like, let me go somewhere where I can do a lot of things and understand what I love or what I'm passionate about. So it was a bit of a different journey. I'd love to say I was like, yes, I thought HR technology was where it's at, and I went to the company that was going to be the best. And I mean, in some ways, I got really lucky. But I knew what I didn't want.
Yeah, and well, you've been at Achievers for close to like a decade, I think, by the time you left. And so even staying at one company for 10 years is quite a long time for, I think, most people. And I'm wondering that throughout that period, like you started from like the early days, like one of like the founding employees of the company, as you kind of wrote in like your own profile. What kind of systems did you build in your kind of journey to, I think I would say, like allow you to kind of get to this point of continued growth and to this point of deciding to leave and start your own company? Like what kind of systems did you have? So an example like I'd give, like, so for me personally, like when I started thinking about like creating systems in my own career and being very purposeful about my own growth when I was in consulting, and like I learned to ask for forgiveness, not permission, when I'd be doing things. And I think you've also mentioned this in one of your own interviews as like an advice that you'd give to other people as well. But I'm wondering, what kind of systems did you have, and what kind of like philosophy were you like developing while you were going through this 10-year journey?
Yeah, I mean, changing from marketing to customer success or other things I was doing, I think one of the things was just follow what you're passionate about, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're not happy or feel like you're doing something above and beyond just your role and a salary, I think that was one thing I always told myself. We got bought by a larger company at Achievers. I could have had the opportunity on taking really safe, high-paid jobs in other places, but it wasn't as passionate to work with, that company or other ones that I was getting offers. It was more passionate to start WorkTango because that's, again, it was something that, we actually, when we built the company, we said we don't have a mission because missions end. We have a lifelong passion to improve work lives. So that's one thing where I always told myself where, I want to make sure I'm in that state of mind in everything I do. In terms of other systems, one thing I think we did really well, and even at Achievers at the company, was we didn't have, performance management standard processes like other organizations had. What we did is we learned from a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits of Vern Harnish, and he talked about these concepts of what made companies great and growing. And one simple idea was this concept of top fives. And it was like, how do you identify the top 5 things you're going to prioritize as a department, as an individual, every single week? Because anyone's been in a high growth company, things change, right? Like it's chaos sometimes, and maybe I just like that chaos, but it was always this thing to prioritize. I mean, for 16 years now, every morning I start with, what's the top 5 things I'm going to do today? What are the top 5 things I want to accomplish this week? And then also I have a monthly one as well. And then I think that, we instill that into the minds of, departments and different team members, but that's something I still do, and it's helped me stay focused.
Can you share a little more about what other kind of stuff you have in your own personal system that you've maybe tacked on, or things that you've continued doing for a long time on top of like the top 5?
Yeah, so one other thing I've also done is always looking at a different perspective. So I'm always open to I always say it costs nothing to listen. So if someone reaches out to me, actually just yesterday I was having coffee with a woman who just moved to Canada after being she's only been in Canada for 3 months after living in India all her life, was an HR specialist there, and wanted to just talk to someone in the space. I always make room for those people, but I always reach out at least once a month to talk to someone else because it's a different perspective. It gets out of the heads down working all the time. It allows you to just chat and be creative. So those are some of the things that I've done as well. And the other thing I did was just make time for me. can't beat around the bush. It's a lot of work working in high growth companies. It's hard to find like time for yourself. So little things, right? Like finding time to lie on the couch 10 minutes a day and play guitar, or just the little things that kind of separate yourself. I tried the meditation thing. I sucked at it. I know it's not about that. I'm trying to get into it, but little things that I could control a little easier. But just thinking about yourself as well, because guess what? The work's not going to end. There's always going to be something to do, and you'll get burned out pretty quickly if you don't take some time.
And I think just to kind of add on to that, it's funny, like yesterday, so I had a conversation with an entrepreneur who is based out of Vancouver, and he asked me a question on just kind of training I do, because I go to the gym like 6 times a week, and he was asking, oh, do you like going to the gym because you get to empty your mind and not think about work? And I told him, well, actually, I get in my most creative self when I'm actually at the gym. Like I bring a notebook with me because I have so many business ideas that come up while I'm lifting, and so I have all these like ideas I just fill my notebook with by the time my gym session ends, and then I can execute on them when I'm actually at work again. And so I think these kinds of personal space that you create to try to create this kind of forced like white space can actually work really well to the overall goal as well. And you don't really have to, forcibly sit down and say that I'm working because I'm sitting at my desk looking at my computer. It's just, you can find other ways to really contribute to the whole journey.
Yeah, like so many great ideas come when you're just not under the stress of work and you're either just sitting on a patio or just relaxing. And the one thing I failed to mention is I have historically the last kind of 2 decades now usually spend 6 to 8 a.m. for me, right? And whether that is the gym or whether that is catching up on things, whether that is just reading or watching the sport, doing something that I like to do that isn't work oriented, I've always kind of maintained that. And I know there's a bunch of articles on like, oh, it's bullshit to wake up at 4 and you don't need to do that. And I mean, maybe 4 is a little early, but I always found it's hard. No one's going to find you between 6 and 8, right? Like typically, other time zones maybe, but that's a lot easier to carve time for yourself than 5 to 7 where things happen, things get extended at work, people need things. I mean, you're exhausted at the end of the day and you just want to do nothing. But that's something I've always done to carve out that time.
Yeah, and as someone like I used to do 4:30 every morning when I was in consulting.
Oh, really?
And so I wrote one of my first blog posts ever was on doing that for like a good chunk of time, and that made me famous among my friends as the person who wakes up at 4:30. And every time I catch up with an old colleague, I was like, "Do you still wake up at 4:30?" I thought, no, like that was, I had to then because I had no control over my life after I entered the office, because in consulting you can work till midnight and you don't know until the day of that you'll be there until midnight. So I had to wake up at 4:30, but nowadays I don't. I tell them, now I'll wake up at like 7, but I do something similar like you, where I found that for me a 2-hour creativity block is perfect for me, where I either write, read, or think for 2 hours, and that's done wonders for me, like as one of the first things in the morning right after my morning journaling. And yeah, I think there definitely is something to be said about that focused time block. Even if it's not working, it's something for you, like actually investing in yourself and your own growth.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I noticed though, like from 2 very like specific things, is the fact that you call yourself a chief engagement officer instead of chief executive officer, but also when you go to like your company website, as well as when you just spoke about it as well, about how you have a passion, not a mission, because missions end. It seems that they're like, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I feel like you have this kind of particularization about the words that you choose to use. And I'm curious, like, is that something that you've always been very cognizant of, like being very purposeful about specific words and what it means to you?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that word, purpose, right? Like I think that's the way I think about the workplace, right? If you want to, like, you're going to stay at a place if you find there's a higher purpose, you're there for more than a paycheck. I don't want to bring up Maslow and the stuff we learned in HR 101, but there is truth to that, right? If you don't feel like, if you can pay your bills and you don't feel like you're going to lose your job tomorrow, like the security part of it, there's other things that motivate you to be at work. So I've always thought about that higher purpose, and yeah, how do you use words to try and draw people's attention to that? And maybe that's the marketer in me, whether it's you use certain words or combinations of them to capture attention. And sometimes it can be construed as it's a marketing tactic, but even things like our passion or chief engagement officer, those types of things, those are just ways to help us reinforce what's important. And I think those words do matter, and I didn't come up with this, but even back at Achievers, they named the HR department employee success. Like, think of how, instead of just calling your humans resources, which, were more than that, employee success was what the purpose of that department was, right? How do you create a successful experience for employees in the workplace? So I do think words definitely matter, and try to, infuse that. And even little things, right? Like, we have a daily tango at our company every single day for 11 minutes, and we could call it the meeting, but it's always fun to brand things to remember them at the end of the day.
Do you tango? Like, do you actually compete in tango?
No, I've never tangoed in my life. I've tried salsa, but it failed miserably.
So why is a company called WorkTango?
Good question. So it was funny. I actually wrote a blog about this too, and when my co-founder and I, we both spent the kind of 10, 11 years at Achievers. When we started the company, we were actually living in different countries. I was in the UK and he was in San Francisco. And I was back in San Francisco one day. We had the idea of the company. We're sitting at this cafe on 3rd Street, and I threw this basically this spreadsheet at him with like 12, or I think it was probably 20 different words or items of what we could call the company. Actually, I think I put the picture on that blog. You should take a look at.
Okay.
And secretly, I liked WorkTango, and that's the one he chose. But the idea around it was, one is, if you think about what work should be, it should be something you're passionate about. It should be something you're in sync. Like, you want to be in sync with employees. And if you think about the tango, it's a passionate dance. You can only succeed if you're in sync with your partner. So those two concepts really is where WorkTango came from. And the first people we told hated it and told us we should change it, and we couldn't get the URL, but we loved it for the concept around it, and we said we're gonna stick it through, and we're still WorkTango today.
Nice. And so you met your co-founder, I think 16 years ago or so. Like,
It's in 2005, yeah.
Yeah. And so but in the beginning, you said that you didn't really have this kind of entrepreneurial bug when you first joined Achievers. When did that start kind of festering up, this idea of starting your own company? And how long until you decided to sit down with your co-founder and say, you want to start a company together? Should we build something? And what was the first idea then?
Yeah, it's actually I never really reflected on it that much. But even though it wasn't start companies, I always did things to bring people together, whether it's run events or even now pub crawls, you name it. It was always about doing something and being the kind of the aggressor and trying to start something. But it was never about, to your point, about building a company. That wasn't the initial part of what I wanted to do. But after working at Achievers for 10 years and seeing what passionate people can do, getting a lot of inspiration from the leadership there, seeing it can be done. Obviously, when you see it once, it obviously gives you a little bit of confidence, and when you're a part of it, that helps. So I think, once, and again, knowing from that experience what I wanted for myself was, why not try? What was the worst that can happen? I have to find a job, and, that's not the worst thing, right? I hope I can get a job somewhere. I might be looking for a job in a couple of years. If someone's hiring, let me know. But the idea was, I would have regretted not trying. So, it was the same, it was just that conversation with Nada. It was, listen, this is what we're passionate about. We've been in HR tech before. We're not there anymore. Do we want to extend that, that passion and fix a problem? And that was just alignment on day one. And we built a bunch of MVPs. We figured out what people liked, what they didn't, learned through the process, and then we find ourselves here today. But it was again, it goes back to that passion thing. We both wanted to do something that had a higher purpose than just having a job, but also doing something better for the workplace. And that's where we both landed, and everything kind of falls into place from there.
And so was it a very well thought out plan where you went through all these MVPs, and then you guys decided, okay, now we have we have a proof of concept. We know how this company is going to look. Let's all quit together on this day, and then we're going to execute X, Y, Z. Was it like that, or how did that period go about?
No, we were packaged out of Achievers. We literally didn't have jobs. I was doing consulting with them and with other companies. He was doing some stuff on the side. So there was no wonderful master plan. And even the MVPs, right? We built a couple of different products with the manager in the center of everything. Like one was better one-on-one conversations with leaders. One was agile performance management, like not getting out of this annual goal setting. And because again, no one does anything different when they're not accountable for a year later, and even the employee voice stuff. And we navigated through it. We didn't know what success was going to be, and it's that true concept of MVP. Just throw things out there, right? You're going to learn a lot more than trying to build the most perfect product. So it was not well scripted and planned and exactly what we thought we were going to do. We spent a year and a half before we put a product into market. A lot of up and down and learning. But I'd love to sit here today and say it was all all scripted, but oh my gosh, it wasn't.
Yeah, I think that, so. Like right now you've been at WorkTango, I think close to 4 years, right? Is it like October, which is like the 4 year mark?
Yeah, October.
And so, but you've been at Achievers for 10 years. You've helped that company grow to like 300-400 people. It got acquired, and I think in our first conversation you mentioned how you had the opportunity to maybe be like the chief marketing officer at Achievers even after it got acquired, have an amazing salary and compensation and all that, but to put it all to the side and start a company that you've also bootstrapped, it's not even venture funded. What, like, can you take me through like the mentality then? Like what was going through your head then? What was going through the support group that you had around you? Like, was everyone pretty supportive of the decision you were making after 10 years at this place, and putting aside this C-suite level title and like opportunity there, and choosing to go into the unknown that way?
My parents still don't understand. No, you know what I mean? It's I don't know, maybe I'm really lucky. I surround myself with people that are willing to be supportive of different things that I choose to do, and no one was really saying it's not a great idea, and I don't know if that would have dissuaded me other way anyways, but it was just it was the right thing to do, right? It was and again, what's the worst that can happen? We failed and we did something else or found another job. Now, we were pretty lucky to be able to get some funds from the whole Achiever sale to not have to worry about starving, for the first year of that world. That being said, weren't pulling salaries for a long time, and that's a change in your lifestyle and something you need to be willing to do. And yeah, even to now, we're bootstrapped, and we always have to make that consideration. Do we want to raise capital and really accelerate? Especially in our market, it's really hot. There's a lot of things moving. 2 of our competitors were recently acquired for ridiculous numbers of, amount of money. So we always have to talk about those decisions, but we also have to talk about when you make those decisions, what impact does it have on the company and the people, right? Like we went through raising capital and having investors in our last organization, and it changes things for sure. But there's a lot of pros to being able to accelerate and the added Rolodex and smart people by your side. So, there was a lot of, put it this way, it doesn't matter where you're starting the company or whether you're a year in or 4 years in, there's always going to be these pivotal decisions that need to be made, and just trying to give a lot of thought to what that looks like, and what you want the outcomes to be. And it gets back to a question I always get asked too, right? Like, what's the goal? Sell the company? I was like, no, like if you're building a company to sell it, then you're not doing the things that your customers will find value in, right? You're making short-term decisions to have your books look good so that you can sell a company. And we've always been focused on saying, listen, if that ever happened, it would happen. That's fine. But our focus is not doing that. Our focus is building a great company of passionate individual employees and customers that love their experience. The rest of that stuff will happen if we choose it to happen. But you never want that to be the focus. You make wrong short-term decisions.
Yeah, and I totally agree with always having the long-term perspective in mind, whether it's in investing or building a company or even in a career, in any kind of aspect in life in general. But
we might be running out of money in 6 months, right? And be like, oh my God, we got to raise. But, the reality is your reality. So you need to kind of figure out where you are at that moment in time. But, like I said, never build a company to flip it is kind of the way I view the world.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that one. But so you said how like you didn't launch a product until like a year and a half, and so you're going this entire period without paying yourself a salary, and I can only imagine that there's constant turmoils and volatility even in a day, in a week, in a month, in your mental state and like the business in general. But were there kind of particular inflection points that gave you and like your team confidence that I think we're onto something. I think this is going to work to continue to push on?
Yeah, I mean, we were really lucky early on to get a partnership that helped us do a couple things, accelerate, growth from a sales standpoint, accelerate our product based on what that partner was doing in their past. And they built a similar product, and we had a lot of learnings on that. So that was one pivotal thing where we ended up building a partnership with a large organization that helped us get to another level and add a lot of credibility, right? When we provide advisory services and technology to, small companies, medium-sized companies, but also large global organizations, large brands. That credibility really helped. So that's probably one of the bigger ones. And then I always say, when it comes to the key leaders we have here, those are pivotal moments as well. You make good hires, that's going to help accelerate the company. We always talked about this back at Achiever, start with who, then what, right? If you find the right people and you can afford them, we can't just hire all the who's, as a bootstrap company, but the people make the difference, right? And that's where I find every time we make those decisions, and we haven't made the right ones all the time, but when you do, and it's like, yes, we need more of those folks.
Yeah, I think in one past interview that you said, hire slow, fire fast. That was like a learning that you had. And is there like a particular example or past instance that helps you kind of realize that learning of like the difficulty of not firing fast or maybe hiring too fast?
I mean, it's every example. Like, it never gets easier, right? If you're finding an individual is just not there yet, or not passionate, or you could do a little bit of the upsell or the training, etc., or throw more money at them. That I find they're all sugar rushes. But like, at the end of the day, if you in your heart, especially as a leader, feel like this person isn't at the next level, or they're just not exuding that passion, delaying it just makes it get worse. Mm-hmm. So that's what I found. I've made mistakes where I've just delayed it, never got better. And not without trying, or whether it is having that conversation, upskilling where required, etc. But yeah, I find in all situations, like, it just didn't seem to get better, and it's probably better for both parties, right? Like, how do we both find happiness elsewhere? That person with another role, and us with finding someone else that's that's going to fit that role a little better.
And it's when I first, you hear a lot of leaders say, the importance of hiring right, and also like firing fast when it's not a fit. But I think as I've also been on my journey and also gone to speak with more entrepreneurs, I've learned to appreciate that it's probably a really hard decision to fire someone, especially when you are a smaller company where it's extremely personal. I personally believe all business is personal, but I think at that level where if you're not like 1,000-person organization where someone at the top can say fire X amount of people and they get fired, like, it can be that. But at a smaller company, I think it would be just so personal that to even let go of someone.
Oh, it sucks. Like, it sucks when you're 10, it sucks when you're 100, it sucks when you're 1,000. Like, it's never an easy conversations. I've been in situations where companies aggressively grown and then had to lay off 10-20% of the company, and that's not even has nothing to do with people's performance, right? That's even harder, right? So it's a shitty discussion no matter what, and you never obviously never hire someone with the intention of that being the outcome. But I find if if the discussions and conversations are more open, then it's a lot easier to come to that agreement a lot a lot earlier than just making a call of cutting someone. And I've always been a big fan of whatever we can do, whether that's make the introduction, be a reference, any way that we can help in those situations, you do. But it sucks. I dread it. No, I don't think anyone likes it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I even think about how I'll, even if I have, let's say, a physiotherapist, or I have a powerlifting coach, even if I think about they're not really pulling their weight in this manner or X manner, even choosing not to go back to them, it's hard. For me, I might be maybe too soft and naive in that aspect, but when I think about that, I can't even say no to my chiro. So I wonder how much harder it would be to let go of someone that you've been working with.
And sometimes And what's even harder, I find, is people leaving, right? Them choosing to not wanting this to be the place, or, you know, whatever company you're at. But that happens in high growth companies, right? Usually what happens is you have a bunch of people that are really good at doing a lot of things, right? They wear multiple hats. They're kind of the jack of all trades. But as you grow, then you start hiring people who have done it before, experienced, and in most cases, it's over the heads of those folks that were doing those things today. And my mentality is like, let's say we landed a bunch of clients or raised a bunch of money tomorrow. We need to hire people that don't have to learn. Like, they have to hit the ground running, building on their experiences. Yeah, they can learn the product, etc. But, you know, it's like the hire we made, and we opened an Ottawa office and hired a head of sales and marketing. Came from a competitor, knew the space, has built this engine before 4 or 5 times. It's like, we're a high growth company. I don't have time. We can't just have someone learn on the job. And what happens in those cases, you hire those folks and the people under them feel like they're being hired over and they choose to leave. So there's situations that are going to happen. People are going to leave. I'd love to have 100% retention, you know, every day, all day. But that's when I get more worried, when people are choosing to, you know, find happiness elsewhere. And, you know, luckily it's only happened once in our history here. And, you know, and she was great. She wanted to move to Spain to, you know, teach English, and kind of a passion of hers. And I don't know how you, you know, how you compete against that. But, you know, that's one thing, you know, what is my role? It's make sure the team's engaged here and we're building something great, and everyone feels like they're a part of it.
I also want to touch back on the first big partnership, the pivotal partnership. There's a bit of a self-indulgent, selfish aspect here, because as I've told you before, as I'm trying to build up my own advisory service, I'm trying to find and get that first partnership. What was your process like in getting that first kind of big client? What was the experience, like the big learnings, and like how did the process go the way you expected it to, and how did it not go the way you expected it to?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, it wasn't something we were out there looking for. I mean, the quick story is I literally was speaking at an event about our journey and our product. Someone that worked at that company said, "Oh, that looks kind of cool. We built that and have been using that internally for 3 years, but yours looks a little more robust." And long story short, they ended up, you know, using ours, ending the life of theirs, and moving customers on, you know, onto the WorkTango platform. So that was kind of we weren't searching for that. It was a nice kind of, you know, nice thing that happened early stage. But also those partnerships don't always go, you know, the way you think they might go, right? Like, you know, we weren't a giant company. How do you start building financial models and risk from a big company to a small one? So, you know, there weren't any really financial components to that partnership. It was really more of kind of a, you know, handshake, we'll support each other, refer business, etc. So, you know, again, that relationship continues to be the same and really fruitful, and we find a lot of value in it, even if there's no financial ties on either side. So, I always find it's back to that point earlier. It costs nothing to listen. Right? Have that discussion, have that conversation. You never know what's going to come from it.
Mm-hmm. And so then when you actually go out now, when you actually start looking to bring a customer on board to like the WorkTango platform and onboard them, what's the discussion like? Like, it's I just don't think it's like I don't imagine it's like some kind of service where you just pay, you subscribe, and it's done, and you just follow these instructions. I'm imagining that there's actually like a longer kind of multiple iterations of conversations where you like talk about what do you need, what can we do for you, and all like what's that process like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically starts with people identifying their problem, right? And their problem might be, hey, we're working with a huge consulting firm. We're paying so much money, but we're not getting a lot of value, or it's taking forever to get our feedback. We do this ourselves. Like, we have people who are sending out, getting feedback from employees, spending 30 hours in Excel magicianry to figure out the results and the trends, and then another 30 hours sending it to executives and leaders, and we just don't have 60 hours a month to do manual work. So there's those parts where there's people that clearly have issues or problems and they're trying to better that experience. And then it usually starts off with a demo, right? People are like, okay, let's have a conversation. So they reach out. Someone on our team will walk them through what our advisory services are, what the platform is, and understand here's what we provide. Basically, at the end of the day, it's this kind of a show and tell of this is the value we could provide you, first by understanding their needs. Some small companies, it could literally, yes, it's exactly what we need, and sign a deal tomorrow. Like there's been times it's come in less than a week, you're bringing on a new customer. When you start getting medium and large, it might be a second, a third, a fourth demo with the rest of the HR team or the executive team or anyone else involved. Sometimes they're large RFPs where they take 3 months of RFPs and procurement. And we just landed a bank in the US that it was 9 months since we had the first discussion. So there's always outliers and everything's a little different, but usually the process is, it's that first conversation. You're meeting usually with other stakeholders in the business, especially for medium and large organizations. And then, they're probably looking at other competitors or vendors as well. And then they make a decision, then you go through contract and procurement. And for us, it's not a huge, contractual thing. Like we're not, it's not a complicated kind of process to work with us, which is nice, and it helps onboard things faster. But that's kind of the process, and the typical one, just the timing has been depending on the size of the company.
And do you find that there's a kind of a pattern of certain kind of leaders or companies that empirically know that this is the kind of product that they want or that they need to help the company get better? Or do you find that you just have to spend a lot of time convincing people in the early onset, or do you find that rather you actually work with people who don't really need much convincing, they already empirically know?
Yeah, all the people always ask me what's your perfect customer and what industries, and I was like, companies that care about their people, right? Like in most cases, they're doing something like this, whether it is with a high-priced consulting firm or whether they're doing themselves, but they're spending a lot of their time, right? And for us, it's typically a budget move. It's not having to find new budget for. So we're not having to do much convincing. The only convincing is, hey, why WorkTango versus someone else in some cases. But we're lucky in that way. But, we've been in the experience back in Achievers days where a recognition platform, like what is that? Like you were trying to sell people on a new concept, which is a little bit different. So we're lucky in that round where these are people that are already listening or wanting to. We're just kind of a better technology and advisory system to do that.
And in terms of, I think, the experience that you've had now building up WorkTango personally as an entrepreneur and the kind of things that you might even maybe see in your client side, something funny that I read in one of your past interviews is it's very related to the investing world. So in investing, I think it might have been Buffett or Charlie Munger who said your competitive advantage is a living organism. It either grows or shrinks every day. And you made that comment about trust, where you have to build trust or if it'll erode, and it's a constant moving thing back and forth. There's no static 0 point for trust. What have you done, or what have you seen work best in terms of building trust? And conversely, what is something a process that you implemented that you thought would build trust, but it didn't really have as big of an impact that you thought it would?
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me think. Well, one thing, and this is the challenge with any vendor, right? You're providing a service, whether that's advisory services for strategy or technology, and things are not always going to go perfect, right? Every technology has a bug or something, right? So I think part of the idea is, how do you make sure that there's just open lines of communication? And one of the kind of big value sets here is being focused on the success of our customers. So we invest a lot of time in the team to do those things. Think about an Amazon. You can't find anyone, you can't call anyone, you can't email, you know what I mean? It's really hard to get someone. We put chat bots in our platform for people to reach out to us in real time, whether it's our contact or 1,000 of their leaders on the platform. So we do whatever we can to be very, very customer focused. So that's become the DNA here. Our net promoter scores were high 80s in the last 2 years, unheard of for tech companies. Doesn't matter if you're a client person, a marketing person, a developer, anyone can speak to our customers here. So it's one of those things where we've built that DNA from the ground up, which makes it a lot easier to be very customer focused. So that's kind of one way that we try and build that trust, because as I mentioned, something's going to go wrong. The platform might go down. There might be a bug. We might advise someone something and it doesn't work. But it's that trust and that relationship where we're always going to be available for you. We're going to do whatever we can to make you love your experience. And I find that really helps from a trust factor. There's a think the number's around 15 to 20% of our customers have just come from referrals from our current customers, right? So that really helps. It's good business, not because we want the referrals. It's just good practice, right? Let's do what we can to support those folks. But in terms of something we've rolled out, I always find that companies, like, they run referral programs. Like, hey, go, and if you provide me a customer or someone in referral, we'll give you back, a discount on your current product, etc. And I find, like, you know what? If anyone needs to be incented to refer us, then they're doing it for the wrong reasons. So we just don't do it. We're like, that was one thing where we rolled out, and we're like, no, at the end of the day, we want to get referrals for the right reason. So that's the one thing that comes to mind in that question, where, maybe it wasn't as a great idea to start getting customers referring their business to us.
And then what other processes have you created internally then inside WorkTango to build trust with your own people? And which ones have you seen work the best compared to ones that weren't as effective maybe?
Yeah, so one thing we do, just even physically, like our daily tango every day, every single employee, one of the items is what we call, a red flag. So does anyone need support? Does anyone blocked, a customer unhappy, something that's going to impact the business negatively? And customers are a big part of that. And people can bring it up. Hey, I'm stuck and I feel like I can't provide this best service, or something's not working. And we make sure that we pull whoever needs to be pulled aside immediately after that meeting to have that discussion and remedy it. So it's kind of like the safe space for people to raise their hand and say, listen, I'm stuck or I need help. And that's every single day. So we book a half hour for this meeting, but we know the meeting's only going to go 11 to 15 minutes. But the next 15 is just to solve anything that comes up. So that helps build that. One, we're making space for it, and we're trying to build availability so to be able to help people. The other is, we're a company that helps other organizations get feedback from their employees. So we do a weekly pulse. Every week, our employees provide feedback on how they're feeling. We rotate questions that matter from an engagement level to understand trends of how people feel based on different, different drivers. Do they feel recognized? Do they feel tied to our purpose, etc.? We do weekly retrospectives as part of that pulse. What went well this week? Right? Celebrate wins, but what didn't? And not just what didn't, but what are we doing differently? So there's always this commitment to make sure employees' voices can be heard. We communicate them as a group, as a team. Everyone is part of deciding not just where they're pissed off. We call it dissatisfaction, but reinforcement, like what are they going to do about it? So it's kind of, instead of workplace dissatisfaction, there's a concept called participative management. So don't just tell me what sucks. What would you do about it? Or what's someone else's suggestion of what they would do about it? So we have these just conversations that are happening that allow that to be better. Now, the problem with that is that's usually group discussion. Like, someone might not feel comfortable in that environment. So when we do get these pulses or this information, we're always saying, listen, talk to your leader if you're feeling like something's broken, there's an issue, above and beyond. Maybe you don't want to communicate in that, environment. So there's kind of a confidential component, a discussion component, but then the one-on-one with your leader. So those are a bunch of things that we do, and we're going to make mistakes, and we realize that we didn't have a way where people can just have more of a confidential way to do it with a discussion with their leader, and we implemented that into the process as well.
Oh, yeah, I think those kind of stuff would definitely be impactful. Have you found something where when you get feedback on it, the employees keep on saying, this is something we really have to, was there something that really hit the nail on the head on a process where you thought, yeah, let's try this, and the feedback was amazing, or the results were amazing, people were super in love with something?
A lot of things, right? Everything from, we just moved into an office and the chairs sucked. All right, well, let's figure out something. Let's make it a better experience for people that are sitting, day to day, day in and day out, right? A lot on communication. It's different communicating when you're 3 employees than when you're 9 than when you're 20. Mm-hmm. So we get feedback on, we do weekly, we do our sprints, we do these recognition moments, we do our goal setting. So we have all these things, but we got feedback that we were over communicating certain things in multiple forums. Could we consolidate it? People like the changes that were made. We actually have some now we're talking about on Monday to figure it out based on the employee feedback. So it really depends. Some of them are really tactical and simple and easy. Some of them might be changing the structure of, the communication. The other ones, which are deeper subjects, we actually do lunch and learns. So good example, there are people here that don't talk to our prospects or customers very often. And they don't even know how they get to the mix. So we do lunch and learns on, well, here's where people start the conversation. Here's how they talk with our marketing systems. Here's when, I just mentioned to you, they do all these demos and here's involved. And then people have more exposure to what's happening there. So again, it's all over the map, and it happens so frequent here. I mean, it's hard to isolate just one issue because it happens all the time. But that's the whole part of feedback and agility, right? Like just moving on the feedback. And too often companies do that once a year, and someone's sitting there for 364 days saying no one gives a shit what I think, right? And that's a problem. So we try to make it more frequent. Importantly, we can't fix everything, right? Like there's going to be things where we can say, listen, we just can't do that. And it's better to say that than ignore it, right? So at the end of the day, right, if they know the why, that's really impactful as well.
And in terms of being very innovative and like building all these processes, I find that for me, at least personally, like the more books or literature or learnings in general that I have on various past innovative companies, it allows you to be more creative of your own processes. Like there's companies like Zappos and Netflix and Google and like Basecamp, and they all have totally unique, I think, in their own way, although they have the core focus of being innovative with their people processes and a focus on culture. I'm sure you've studied extensively about all these different kinds of businesses, but right now, is there a particular leader or company that you find yourself gravitating quite frequently towards in terms of like thinking in terms of, this company did it this way, maybe I'll try it too?
Yeah, it's a good point. And one thing to mention, like you're mentioning all those companies, and I'm coming here telling you what we do at WorkTango, and this is not like we didn't invent this stuff, right? Like we're just standing on the shoulder of giants of other people that have done this. So this is just things, it's more about making part of your culture than anything. So, I will never take credit for any of the things I just said. It's just we had this value at our old company, and it wasn't R&D in terms of research and development. It was rip off and duplicate. Like what's working for someone else? They've already done the research. Let's just figure it out on our side. But in terms of a company, and maybe it's because Alfred Lin, who was from one of the founders of Zappos, sat on our board at our last company. I've always just had this like more intimate connection with Zappos and what they've done in terms from a people standpoint. And their whole focus was, I don't care if we're delivering shoes, which then turned into any product, that then turned into a billion plus acquisition from Amazon. It was all about delivering happiness. Like that was the concept. And I think that's one that I always kind of gravitate to. Like if I can deliver engaged and happiness to our employees, that can then in turn to our customers. Now we're gonna grow and be successful. So that's one that's always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I recently bought the book Delivering Happiness. I think it arrived a few weeks ago before
Nice.
I flew over to Vancouver. But yeah, like I've been a big fan of Tony Hsieh's like interviews. I constantly watched it, and I decided, all right, I think I've watched enough of his talks now. I'll buy the book.
I don't know if anyone I don't know if they do this anymore, but in Vegas they do their you can just go on tours of their office.
Yeah, I heard.
And it's really cool. It's a great experience. So many years ago I did it, but if anyone's in Vegas, check it out.
Yeah, maybe. I think after I read the book, I'll I'll reach out and see like if they're still doing that or if they're open to doing that again.
Yeah.
And so as we kind of wrap up on this kind of final leg of our interview, some common questions I like to ask my guests are, well, I'm going to switch this one up a little bit for you specifically.
Oh, no.
I'm very curious, is because you come into this kind of HR tech world with a different background, like someone who hasn't spent like 20 years in HR per se. Is there a particular thing that you find that you think differently from the traditional kind of HR industry about, like something where you have a different opinion than the conventional wisdom inside the typical HR tech world?
Yeah, and I don't think it's like a fault of their own, but HR grew up from the finance world. They reported to the CFO. They typically looked at the world in years and in quarters, right? That's the way we put out financial statements, etc. But in this agile world, we don't look at our financials quarterly or annually. We don't talk to our customers that infrequently. Yet a lot of the HR practices, everything from rewards and recognition to performance management to the engagement survey, like all these are annual practices that aren't making any impact in today's modern workforce with the modern employee that has higher expectations, they're more consumer thinking, etc. And I think it's just a shift of mindset to kind of like what I always call the consumerization of HR. Like, what are companies doing for their customers? How do they approach it from a sales and marketing standpoint? Everything from engaging them, understanding what they're going to do next and knowing their sentiment, loyalty programs to keep your customers. Like, what are you doing at a customer level? The same concepts and data can be used at an employee side. So to answer your question, I think it's just getting out of the compliance of, we have to do all these things from an HR policy standpoint, and we can only do them once a year, to what do our employees really want? So it's a huge shift of focus. And you know what? It's not an abnormal shift, right? 30 years ago, it was all about supplier relationships. It's like, how do we know more about our suppliers and what they're going to do and predict what they're going to do next, and better systems and technology to speak to them and be responsive. And then it turned into CRM with Salesforce. How do we know our customers better and track everything and predict it better and provide better services so they never leave? And then marketing automation. And then now it's like employee relationship management. And that's why you're seeing if everyone thinks it's a fad, I mean, there was more investment in HR technology in the last 3 years than the last 20 combined. So I think it's, the mindset needs to shift to this new world. And it's just like the companies today that, companies weren't on the S&P 500 5 years ago that are now, right? You can't continue to do the things that you're doing, right? RIM and Blockbuster, all in our lifetime, right? There's a lot of companies that will end up there if they don't change, and HR just needs to start shifting that. What they did before isn't going to work today.
And on the topic of the shift from the past to the future, if we can take it back to the past, and if you were to imagine maybe the 20-year-old Rob,
which was only like 5 years ago,
right, exactly. He's maybe probably like the third year, fourth year in Ryerson, who's not looking at what you're doing right now, running WorkTango. What do you think that Rob's emotional reaction would be?
What would the young Rob think about now?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think he would be pretty proud. He'd say, like, listen, Nick, you didn't take the normal route. I think he'd think you're a little crazy not taking the normal route. And I think it's just about, again, it's the things that I'd be happy that I'm still doing something I'm passionate about, right? Like, even at a 20-year-old in university, people thought it was weird, like, oh, you spend so much time with your like family events and all these things you do with your family, and like even living at home, and people were like, that's weird and crazy, but that was stuff that was passionate to me. Like, I cared about them. We had great times together. It wasn't a pain being together with your parents and your cousins and all that. And like, you look back like new Rob, and I was like, I'm so glad I did that stuff. So I think because I was still passionate about that, and I don't care what anyone else said about it, it's kind of similar today, right? Like, it's, it's not the easy route, and people are going to tell you there's an easier way or a better way to do things. But yeah, I think I'd be okay with it.
Is there an advice that you wish you could have gotten at that young age that you want to give?
I wish I went down the entrepreneurial route sooner. I maybe got a little lucky following into a company that allowed me to be entrepreneurial without a lot of the risk. But yeah, I think I would have started to do some more things probably for the community. What I mean by that is, I left Ryerson and didn't step back in that room, in that building. There's more buildings when I came back, for 15 years. And when I moved back to Toronto 2 years ago, I started actually going to speak with the students, giving back to that community. And when I was going to university, I was living at home. I never spent a day on the campus. I didn't live that life. I never gave back to the, to the school that I was at. And even today, I do a lot of events just on my spare time for the HR community, right? It's giving back to that community. So that's maybe one piece of advice to say, what can you do better for the community? Whether it was donating your time, dollars, for something bigger than just, your little bucket that you're in. So that's probably what I'd say.
Awesome. Yeah. That's some solid advice. I'll definitely keep that in mind as well. Like, I've been going back to Waterloo to give like a few talks here and there, and so hopefully I can continue to do more of that if those guys will have me. But
yeah, like there's influential like people that were through school that like, and I was lucky. I had teachers that were, you know, at that time heads of marketing at large brands. I'm like, I learned so much from them, and I'm like, if there's anything I could do to go back and help the Career Center out of Ryerson, like we try to run events there. We can free tickets to our events so they can meet other folks. But those were impactful things when I was 20. Like, what can I do to create those same impactful experiences if possible? You know, knowing that there's not a ton of time, is there any way to kind of build that, you know, build that out?
Yeah. And is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you wish that we talked about, or that you kind of want to leave the audience with?
No, I mean, you know, I didn't know what all your questions were going to be. It was nice to like not be prepped for everything and have a real conversation. So keep that up. You know, and I was true to what I said before. You know, I'm always open to chat with people. It's like, you know, sometimes hard to schedule it and takes, you know, a month to actually make happen. But, you know, again, if anyone was listening, you know, feel free to reach out. Like, it's cool to share the stories and obviously hear other people's as well. It's amazing what one conversation can do. And the other, I guess, the other part of that is people always ask, like, how did you get here? Was it calculated? That story? I literally, the story was how I actually got to, you know, I guess early achievers was, it was Sunday night. I had a hockey game that got canceled. It was a huge storm. Still living at home with my parents. And I went downstairs and I was like, all right, I'm sick of not working. Let me just throw my resume out and see if I can find a job just until I find that next career. So I send that out and I find this little company, again, which was Achievers. And it said that the posting for the job had expired on Friday and it was Sunday. I was like, whatever, I'll just send it. So I send it out, get a call on like Monday or Tuesday, get the job. Now, that one little email, not only was it 10 years of my life where I probably the best experience at work than I think I'll ever have. Hopefully we can supersede that at WorkTango. It brought me to 3 different countries where I live at. I met my co-founder at WorkTango today, right? At Achievers, working together. I met my girlfriend of 12 years working at Achievers. And it was like this one little like thing, this one active thing I did of sending a resume out changed the course of my life in more ways than I can even imagine. So it's just like, take that chance. Reach out to someone who's a leader, you know, they'll be willing to have a conversation with you. If they're not, reach out to the next one. At the end of the day, you're going to have to do something to make that luck or to change that course. And just don't hesitate to do it. Kind of like the story I said yesterday, the coffee with that, you know, the Nancy, that woman who just moved here from India, right? She's talking to all these random people. She's like, I don't like doing it. It's stressful, but she's doing it. And again, cost me nothing to listen. And who knows, one day she'll be a friend, a customer, a partner, an employee, like who knows? So yeah, just go out and do it. It's, you know, it's worst can happen. Like I said, I can find a job. Worst can happen is nothing. And, you know, at least you tried though.
That's an awesome place to end our interview. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with myself and my audience. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it.
And how can they reach out to you if they want to, or like learn more about the company? Is it on your LinkedIn or?
Yeah, just on LinkedIn, or LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. Spend more time there than any of the other social sites these days.
All right, sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope the story was inspiring to you. Hopefully it also helped you expand your perspectives. Hopefully it also made you question the default path that you might have been going on, or the default beliefs you might have had. And maybe now it'll make you even think about doing something about it, doing something different maybe, challenging yourself, being courageous. Who knows? But regardless, I'm really happy that you took some time out of your day to listen to this fantastic story with my guest. And if you would like to somehow, in some way, contribute and help support the podcast, and maybe even just be part of the community that I'm trying to build with the greater OMD Ventures platform, really think about being a stakeholder in the platform. And the quick way to do that is to go to my website, oldmandan.com, and go to the stakeholders page. I believe it's oldmandan.com/stakeholder. and the link is also down below. And that's how you can figure out how you can subscribe, follow to get more updates on the free content, but at the same time also donate, and donate by actually just buying me a coffee. That's just how I put it. And you can buy me a coffee a month, coffee a week, or coffee every day of the year. And think about it as the way that, if you wanted to chat with me, you might just bring me out for coffee and buy me a coffee. Or if you wanted to bring one of my guests out to chat, you might buy them a coffee. So I'm just think of it as I'm the service that's doing that for you, so you can just pay me in coffees. Don't worry, everything will still be free. It would just really help if you would like to show your support this way, so that I can use the coffee money to buy myself actual coffees, and also to buy my guests actual coffees, and use the leftover money to actually grow the platform, as well as even keep it operationally alive as well, because all this isn't really free, and it does take a lot of time to build it as well as operate it and hopefully grow it further. So your support would be amazing if you would like to contribute. And so yeah, just check out the website, go to the stakeholders page, and read the different kind of benefits you might even get as a stakeholder. All right, thank you.